You're listening to the Emulsion Podcast, a show that informs and inspires the restaurant industry to work, live, and create better. My name's Justin Khanna, and I'm a chef and media producer with almost 10 years of experience in award-winning restaurants all over the world. I created this show as a way to give back, to inspire the next generation, and to help you progress your career. The Emulsion Podcast is sponsored by you folks, and Patreon is where that happens. If you're here as a return listener and you enjoyed the episode you just came from and happen to want to support more episodes, I'd really appreciate it. Go ahead and check out patreon.com/Justin Khanna. Thanks in advance if you can. I totally understand if you can't. Free ways you can support this show include leaving a like or comment on this video, filling up all 5 stars on iTunes, or simply sharing an episode with a friend. This is an interview show. If you missed out on asking your burning question to today's guest, don't let that happen again. There is a really handy-dandy form where you can see upcoming guests and ask them your questions. Be sure to check out justinkhanna.com/podcast. I'd encourage you to see who I've got coming up.
When they're blown away, like I get a high from that. Like,
interesting.
Like it's like showing up like that in a way that they wouldn't expect, and especially when you walk in like looking like people judge a book by its cover. So let's be real. When I walk in that way, they expect me just to be a chef, to sit down in the corner, and when I'm able to talk circles around them in numbers, that to me is like exciting.
Today's guest is Derek Simcik, executive chef of Scout Pacific Northwest in the Thompson Hotel here in Seattle. He's been in the game for almost twice as long as I have. I first had the pleasure of shooting some video for an event that Derek and a friend of mine were hosting, and we hit it off right away. So we jam on so many things. I love his food. I love debating industry topics with him. He's traveled the world and lived abroad himself, and in this episode we talk through chefs changing the culture of cities, culinary school alternatives, being a financially knowledgeable chef, growing up with food, hip-hop, tattoos, and more. This is one of those guests and friends that I know someday in the life of this show will show up for a round 2, so stay tuned for that. But this is also a really unique format for a podcast. I know a lot of people, myself included, attempt to obsess over audio quality and having completely soundproof studios and perfect levels. This is different. This is a different kind of episode. I asked Derek to meet for this recording in the restaurant. So for you as a listener, this is almost like being a fly on the wall, or more how I would like you to interpret it if you were to physically pull up a chair and hang out with us over coffee in the dining room at the restaurant. So if you watch the video of this episode, there's literally a brunch service happening behind us. But this intro is over. My chat with Chef Derek Simcik starts now. And after the episode, definitely let me know your feedback on this format. Did you like the restaurant vibe, or do you prefer the more clean and minimal podcast that I'll normally post?
So for cochon or whatever, like the pigs have to be USDA killed or slaughtered, and they have to be skin on, head on. And the only place that does that is south of Oregon, or south of Portland.
So she can't do that kind of slaughter, or she's not certified?
She's not certified to do it herself.
Got it.
And she's actually looking at doing that because she's expanding the pig program over there. And the place she goes to does skin off, which is really weird. And so she had to bring it to the slaughterhouse down in south of Portland. Well, as of right now, my pig's still alive. Because their slaughterhouse, oh, thank you so much. Their slaughterhouse got shut down by the USDA due to paperwork, is what they're saying.
Interesting.
And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, and I'm like freaking out because I have stuff that's got a timeline on curing and stuff like that. Like no charcuterie, it's some other stuff, but it's like, holy shit, like I started freaking out a little bit, and I got everybody on the phone. Anyways, we did a Build-A-Pig with the parts she has in her freezer, so I can get started on some stuff, and my pigs hopefully will be here Tuesday by 1 o'clock.
That's so crazy.
So over so I'm gonna go
pedal to the metal.
Oh my god, they were like, are you gonna be okay? We're gonna have a backup pig just in case. I'm like, we're chefs, we figure this stuff out. We'll do shit on the fly all the time.
Hell yeah.
But so yesterday and the day before I was like nonstop for like every hour on my phone, like between cochon and the farmer and everyone trying to get everything.
That's crazy.
Anyways.
But you're excited for it?
I'm super stoked, man. I'm super stoked.
I'm stoked to be there.
I'm excited about the menu, what we're gonna be putting out for the judges table.
How many people do you cook for?
So the way it goes is right when you show up, it's 26 judges. So you get there's one long table with 2 round tables put together, and there's 26 seatings, and it's basically 6 courses on one plate, like 6 little bites.
Yep.
They say up to 6. I'm like, so we're doing all 6 obviously, but And it's everything from table decor to the actual plate, the food that they judge you on. And it's quick. It's like they don't spend much longer than like 8 minutes or 10 minutes at that
There's a
table.
lot of contestants.
5 chefs. 5 chefs. That's the 5-5-5. 5 chefs, 5 pig farmers, and 5 somms.
Understood.
And they're paired with a somm that pours for you. And then after they're done going through everything, then it opens up to VIP for about an hour. And then they open the floodgates till about, I think it's 4 o'clock, and then they shut it down, and then they announce the winner, and whoever wins goes to Chicago. Last year was the first year it was in Chicago.
Interesting.
Because before it used to always be at Aspen Food and Wine during the same time, but they changed it because of it's not so big, and they don't have any venues out there during that time, so it's now in Chicago.
I don't know how Chicago won that lottery of getting like every single, because James Beard is there.
James Beard's there. That's there.
What else is there?
Well, and they also have like their own. Like,
There's Jean Banchet one.
That's their own personal one, but that's what I was going to bring up was that Jean Banchet it's like I've never seen for a local city food award ceremony. It's like the Oscars. Almost. Like
totally.
People get like
dress up.
to the nine. You have an MC. Like I think last year or the year before it was Musner.
Yep, totally. And I know that guy very well.
Oh yeah, we've talked about that.
Totally. So I don't do an intro. I record an intro after.
Okay.
I record an outro after. I like kind of hype you up, give you kind of like give everybody the lowdown on who you are.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we don't have to do any like small talk to intro. Maybe we can just start with the State of the Union from you and your thoughts on like chefs and media and kind of like where you're at right now. What is it? April of 2018.
Yeah.
Where's your head at?
April 2018. Where am I at? I'm in a place where I think I'm trying to rewrap my head around because certain things have changed in my career in a good way. Professionally, like the day-to-day grind, I've taken on like a regional leadership role as well. So helping support 2 other properties that are part of our company that within the whole company has had some changes with the merger between the 2 companies to create what it is now. And so that's new, trying to get to know each other and those aspects of things. And then myself, within that newness of that is also very new in that aspect of things, especially with the company 2 years now, where before I was with my last company for 8.5 years, traveling the U.S. with them. So part of me in my personal headspace is kind of figuring that out, but at the same time, not being complacent or sitting back and just doing the day-to-day as well. I sometimes sit back and go, why did I agree to these things? Still doing dinners, still doing appearances, trying to do all the cooking competitions I can do, like just trying to always still stay plugged in, and try not to get rusty.
Right.
So that's part of it, but and then the rest of the world, I mean, and then at the same time, it's like observing what's going on, why we're doing that, and it's interesting where we're at right now, both, I guess you would say globally, and also in a very much more micro view of where we are right here in Seattle as well. I think it's very interesting how things are changing and shifting. Obviously for the past, I guess we could say, 20 years now, the media has changed what the public looks at in our the view of what culinary is, or chefs are, and restaurant life is. Hashtag chef life, is what they think it is. And I think a lot of us, myself at fault, project a certain persona out there, because that helps drive that direction sometimes, which people are shocked when they find something else out about how true it really is, because we a lot of times don't put that out there. But it's good. It's bringing awareness. I think it's part of the reason why cooks nowadays are getting paid more than I ever got paid as an hourly cook. They have benefits that I never had or could dream of. I had to go work for a company to get those. They're starting to get a quality of life, which is, as somebody who came up in those older kitchens, it's even though I'm not that old, the old man in me is going like, oh, change. These young whippersnappers don't understand the struggle of working 18-hour days, like 7 days a week for 3 months or whatever, being paid like $7 an hour. But at the same time, it's like, I'm glad because it helps with the the work environment helps with longevity of retaining employees. Turnover's a little bit less when you have a culture in the kitchen now. That's not the old school culture. We're looked at more as leaders. So that whole aspect of things is kind of nice in a global aspect. People's demand of quality, especially in the U.S., now it's kind of great to see this shift go from people just wanted, eating was more of a survival. You need nutrients, you just ate, you didn't care what you put in your body. People had the same meals 7 days a week, now people are hyper aware, and it's not like a West Coast thing anymore, or Alice Waters thing or anything like that. Like it's the global aspect of understanding where our food came from, when the seasons are, what's being put in it. We're very much more hyper aware of that, which to me is very refreshing. Growing up the way I grew up, that was kind of the norm. So I kind of took it for granted until I saw the revolution happening here. And I started on the East Coast, so it kind of felt like the beginning of the revolution, of that evolution for me, happening here in the States, because it was just a little bit later on catching up from what the West Coast was already doing in that timeline, but now it's kind of nationally. So that's kind of interesting in that whole like global aspect, in a good way.
Right.
And then even here in Seattle, as you know, change is happening. It's fastest growing market in America 2 years in a row.
Totally.
I mean, it's thousands of people a month moving here.
Yep. I heard it's like a week.
Yeah, something like that.
A couple weeks where it was like 1,000 people a week. It's just like crazy.
Yeah, it's just like within I've been here 2 years, a little over like 2.5 years, and I've already noticed traffic changing in certain routes and stuff like that. And with that being said, it's just naturally evolving into like the food and restaurant scene here changing as well. And I think it's interesting we're on a cusp of figuring out what direction Seattle's food scene's gonna go, because I think the city as a whole is like, we're in the moment, and if you're super hyper aware, take a moment and look as like the whole city. It's like to actually see in this space and time that we are actually noticing a city shift.
Yeah.
And it's happening in front of our eyes, and a lot of times you just like kind of like blink and it happens. Like we can actually physically see it happening. So it's interesting on that aspect, is to see what's coming into the city, to see how it's going to change when it comes to food and beverage on that aspect. What new chefs may be coming in, how the current chefs may change a little given the demographic changing and what the clientele may want to have to eat now. It's at the end of the day, we have to evolve to survive, and it will be. I think it's exciting in a way to see how that's going to happen.
Rather than being resting on your laurels, as like
or trying to fight it.
I mean, I look at like what recently happened with San Francisco and New York. Like New York just kind of like sat back and was like, we're the best food city in the country. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like we look up and it's like San Francisco has more Michelin stars than New York now. Yeah. We're just like, that's what happens.
Well, and they also lost the James Beard Awards now and stuff like that. Like so, like they're in Chicago. It's definitely one of those things you have to, you can't rest on it because you're never going to grow. And right now, I think there's a lot of attention in this region to see how it grows, because I think a lot of the nation is having a lot of anticipations, or a lot of desire to see this city or this region, the Pacific Northwest as a whole, really, I think, be the next frontier when it comes to culinary.
Who, in your opinion, drives that? Like that change? Is it the chefs? Is it the consumer? Is it just the money? Is it the novelty? Is it? I mean, I think a lot about how like the way that the Bay Area, at least in a couple of restaurants, was able to catapult itself was because it had that fusion of Eastern culture, Western culture. I mean, if you look at a lot of these Bay Area tasting menus, they are like a kaiseki meal. Yeah. And it's like that, I feel like, lent itself a lot to. So who drives that?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's a combination of everyone. Obviously, you need to have the money. You have to have people who have a disposable income, who aren't afraid to spend the money on going out to eat. Exactly. Yeah. And they're adventurous though with spending that money too. So You need that for sure. You also need the openness of the area to be wanting to want that to help it survive. But you also need the chefs too. And I think if I was to prioritize it, you would need the chefs first to be able to want to do it, to push the envelope, to not be scared. But they have to do it in a thoughtful way. It has to be executed right. You can't just throw every trend on a plate and be like, oh, I'm the new hot chef because I'm doing X, Y, and Z.
I feel like Chicago fell victim to that with a couple of chefs.
Yes.
They tried to like just do trends.
Yeah.
And it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally. It's not. Well, because at the end of the day, it has to be good.
Right.
At the end of the day, people, what they put in their mouth has to taste great. Because that's what they're doing. They're eating at the end of the day. And if it's not good food, then why would they? I always say it has to not just look like art and it can't just look like art because it'll end up tasting like art. But it also has to taste good, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it starts with. It's the most key factor because if you have talented individual chefs that are willing to take the risks and are willing but they can do it right, then you can teach the clientele around you to want that, because if it tastes good, it's going to speak for itself. They're going to tell everyone. They're going to have no problem being adventurous. It's educating them in that hands-on approach. If it tastes like art and it's just a trend on the plate, they're going to go there, and that's why trendy restaurants don't last that long.
Yep.
They have a very small, short lifeline, especially with that initial business that they get boom. And then it falls short, it falls flat. But if you do it right, it can, I think, open up things.
Totally. Can you give everyone a little background on you and where you've kind of been geographically? Because it's been, and it can be rapid fire, it can be in depth if there are any stories that stick out that have really impacted you. But you've been all over.
Yeah, I have. So I grew up I grew up moving around a lot. My dad was an agent in the Central Intelligence Agency. Gotta make sure I say it all out because I don't want to say CIA.
Totally.
And people think he was a
School.
chef. Yeah.
The school.
So he worked in the intelligence agency. I was born overseas in Athens, Greece, and then from there I lived in every major continent, going from Athens to Tunisia, Tunis, Tunisia, Northern Africa, to Europe, where Frankfurt, Germany, 2 different tours. London, Amsterdam, South France, came over to the Far East Asia area, Hong Kong, Seoul, graduated high school outside Tokyo, a place called Yokosuka. Fun fact is, side note for all you Star Wars fans, I went to Tunis, Tunisia, where all the Tatooine scenes were filmed.
Whoa.
And the guy who graduated from my high school was Mark C. Hamill.
No
graduate in Japan. Yeah, so it was kind of crazy. His dad was in the Navy, so it was a naval base. Yeah. Well, like 6 degrees of separations in a way. But anyways, and then came back to the States, to DC area, and was going to go to art school, dropped out. Went to culinary school, went to go to Vienna, Austria for a little bit right after graduating, and then came back and then worked in the DC market, from DC to Chicago to Santa Barbara, California, to now most recently Seattle.
Totally. Taking it back to when you were a kid, with moving around a lot, did you, what were some things that you held on to very closely when you were a kid? Do you have anything that you found refuge in, or obviously moving around a lot?
Totally.
What were some hobbies or some things that you?
So moving around and like really reflecting on that aspect, there was a couple things that were constants in my life though. No matter what country we were in and where we were at, my mom's cooking was one. I was very fortunate, and I didn't realize until I got older and I started going to a friend's house and stuff like that, or like a girlfriend's house, or even my wife's house, family's house now, and realizing that everybody grew up eating the same way I did. Mom's from Lafayette, Louisiana, so dinners were different. They were legitimately like crawfish etouffee and chicken fricassee and gumbos and beignets for breakfast, and that was normal kind of cooking for us. And no matter where we lived, she still figured out how to do a lot of that stuff to make sure we were raised kind of that way she was raised. But then we also, we were very open to eating and shopping in the markets and wherever we were at to really embrace that culture. But we did it through food and music. Music was the other one that was huge. My mom's like CD, record, cassette collection was unreal. I think she has something like 3,500 CDs and like another, I don't know how many thousands of records. And it's just, and music was always playing in the house on the weekends and during the day or whatever. So I think art, maybe, I guess if you really put it into that kind of way of things. I originally was going to art school, or was always in every art class or whatever like that, drawing, fine arts. So that was something I always took refuge in, was I always drew. I always sketched. I would sit in my room, door closed, and just draw for hours. I remember actually one time we were in Japan. Yeah, my senior year of high school, I closed the door, and in like 2 or 3 days with a mechanical pencil, I did a life-size drawing of like sketch of like skateboarder mural on one end and a snowboarder mural on the other, and all black and white, like realistic. Took photos, had to give it to like to bring it to art class to show like the professors. The art was always there. So that was a constant. And then cars with my dad. Wherever we were, we'd be like, look, we'd go to every car show. He had like every kind of muscle car, like every Trans Am generation there was. He was a Southern boy, so it was like Trans Ams, Corvettes, and motorcycles were the thing. So that was another thing, like changing oils on his car, spark plugs. Like I always complain that like cars nowadays, you can't do the work yourself anymore, unless you have an IT degree. But back then it was just like we would do it ourselves. So.
That's something I zero knowledge of cars. It's just not my thing. Is there an art form that you either didn't gravitate to, or because you said drawing was like the thing? I took like an Art 1 course in high school, and it was like during my senior year. It was like botch. I just threw it on my thing because I knew I was going to culinary school. We had to do sculpture. We had to do printmaking. We had to do. Is there one that you wish you were better at, or maybe that you like you've tried it and you're like, that's not for me?
I would probably be, I would definitely say like anything, which is so weird because I work with my hands every day.
That's why it blows my mind. It's because it was like sculpture wasn't for me, but cooking is great.
And I was going to say the sculpture and pottery, like anything clay that I had to mold or do, like I tried and tried. I don't know what it was. I couldn't do it, but like I can take a mechanical pencil and draw this realistic life-size like portrait of anything, and like a lot of my ideas, a lot of times if you look through my moleskin notebooks, is a lot of them are drawings, like full-on drawings of plates.
Interesting.
But yet when it comes to like anything 3D, unless it's on a computer, then I can F around with it. But when it comes to actual hands-on 3D stuff, I don't know what it is. I don't know if I don't have the delicate touch enough, but then. It's funny you bring that up. Now it got me like concerned, like why? Because I pull out my, like, you know, when we're doing tasting menus or something like that, like certain elements, I'll bring out my tweezers. I'm able to drop it delicately.
Totally.
But yet when it comes to, that's the one.
It's so weird. Maybe I find comfort in knowing that the food doesn't. It's not that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just that like that slight. It's like that wabi-sabi element to it, right? Where there's beauty in it not being perfect. Whereas
perfection and imperfection.
Yeah, exactly. But when I look at like a piece of art or like a drawing or something like that, like if your proportions for the eyes are off, it looks like a Picasso in a weird way. You know what I mean? Like,
but then in that same argument, you can say Picasso became work.
Totally.
He's one of the masters.
It's so interesting to me. But were you into sports?
I definitely I never played football, but I played basketball and baseball and soccer. Baseball was one of those things. I think once I found the interest in girls, disappointed my dad because I stopped playing sports. Baseball was the one that he was looking at me. I was Little League All-Star team in Germany. We went to go play when I was like, what was I like? Can't remember, 8, 10 maybe. We would have, the tournament we were in, we could have won. If we didn't get crushed by Spain, we would have came over to the U.S. to play in the Little League World Series tournament. So baseball was one of the big ones, and then basketball. My only issue with basketball was I could shoot and dribble like crazy, but I didn't break 5 foot until my freshman year of high school, and I didn't break 5 5'3" until, so I was between 5 foot and 5'3" until the end of my junior year. And then junior year to senior year, through that summer into the winter, like basically like spring of into my junior year to winter of my senior year, I grew from 5'3" to 6 foot.
Jesus. You're 6 foot now?
Just barely, yeah.
Just barely?
Yeah.
I'm like 5'11", man. I
Yeah.
wish I was taller. It's so sad. I want to jam a little bit on crossovers because it's something that you've been pretty well known for. A lot, like when I was doing research on you for this, a lot of the articles were your hip hop dinner, your tattoo dinner. Where does that come from for you, and maybe you can talk a little bit about those dinners you've already done and where the inspiration comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of collaborative dinners, or I call them collaborative because I'm trying to collaborate. It may not be with another chef, but it's with another art form. And to me, I think it goes back to that, my background and my past passions is art, drawing. I'm pretty covered in tattoos, music. I was more of a, like, growing up, I was like a whole bunch of different types of music, like, classic rock to like country big time to, 70s groove kind of funkadelic kind of sounds. But when I came into my own, I was really old school hip hop head. A lot of my friends were b-boys, and and that was kind of like the hip hop aspect of things, like like the greats, like back in the day to me, like Public Enemy, Big Daddy Kane, Beastie Boys. It's just that whole world is kind of like 80s, 90s hip hop. So, anyways, to go back to the question, that's kind of a background of my passions to kind of show where I come up with these is I come into work not looking like it's work.
Right.
So then what I try to do is like, how can I bring more of what I like to do and more of what is fun for me into quote unquote work, because then at the end of the day I get paid to do it, so it's awesome. It's a win-win. And that's kind of where they start to happen. A lot of them come about without, I don't sit around and be like, okay, what's my next one? It literally happens in like all of a sudden the most random moment, and I'll go running down the hall at work to like the hotel GM's like office. I got an idea. It's like I got the next dinner, and they'll look at me like, okay, what is it? And like, and I'll spew it off, and they're like, how did you come up with that? And I'm just like, it just came to me literally like 30 seconds ago, and then we run with it. And I think that's where there's the most truth to it. Like they're most real. Like there's most. What's the word I'm looking for? There's like street cred, or like you can tell there's passion behind it when it's that spur of the moment than if I sat around brainstorming, because then I feel like it's forced.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out what's the next thing that people want and not what I want. So the hip hop one was with that, for example, was I took the food, and I took some of the great hip hop artists of the 80s and 90s, early 2000s favorite dishes, and I did a quote unquote fine dining twist to it, or inspiration to it, so it became a tasting menu. But then we also teamed up with DJ Neil Armstrong, who is Jay-Z's former world tour DJ. So then you actually bring the music element into it as well, where he had a mixtape that played during the dinner, and then he did a DJ session up on the rooftop afterwards, like after a party. But it's bringing that like old school hip hop aspect of the DJ was really the force behind the music, and that's how like rap or hip hop became, was like the DJ was the MC, and he was the one that kind of got everybody together, and then you would have and he would drop the beats or whatever, and then you had the lyricist who would then rap over that. So that's where that one came. The tattoo one was more, there's kind of two factors when I did that one. One was not to get too deep into the political world, but the political climate we were in at the time when this dinner happened was early or late winter, early spring, right after the election, the 2016 election. There was a lot of cuts happening, and arts in public schools they've already been getting cut, but there was a big cut that happened, and that was my refuge in high school and school, was the art classes. I looked forward to those, to get away from the real world for at least an hour. And one of the art forms that, in my opinion, don't get a lot of credit until just recently, being an actual art form, was tattoo art. So that's where I was like, how do I pay homage to these guys who are really good friends of mine that I think are wicked talented? And it was doing a dinner where, so what we did was we encompassed the full like experience, where we actually had a pop-up tattoo shop, where we had I invited 4 artists, all the way from my boy Kenny in DC, Northern Virginia, flew out for this, and people could get tattooed. And then later they came down and had dinner, and then through that dinner is where I took over and told the story of these individuals through food, like what they go through, and it was like every course, like it started with like most of them get inspired by somehow to become artists. So it was like the first one was like a piece of art, like that they would get inspired by. Then it was the ink dish where they could, then it was quote unquote the cannabis dish. It looked like marijuana nugs because the joke there was some tongue in cheek to it, where the joke was like they got high to get like, okay, I can get inspired to draw. Yeah, exactly. And then it went from that to the dish was ink. It was like it looked like your ink pen exploded. To the next dish that looked like paper. So it was like put your ink to the paper. And then there was a dish that was actually like you're tattooing, where the piece of pork was actually tattooed with squid ink that they ate. And then there was, again, that tongue-in-cheek of like tattoo artists, kind of like chefs, are known to party. And it looked like it was tapioca maltodextrin done in a powder, but it was done on a piece of mirror, so it looked like cocaine with the razor and all. So you had everybody doing that. And then the final one was the dessert was used with like Sarah Jerry rum in it. And it was used with that, and then on top of that, we printed on edible paper the tattoo work of the tattoo artists that were there. So you got to see one. So like it was 2 things. Like they got solidified as a great like Sailor Jerry. It got immortalized, and at the same time, to seeing everybody's reactions of like, oh wait a second, that's my tattoo. Wait, that's one I did before. Like that whole aspect was cool. And then all the money, the proceeds and all that went to helping raise money for arts and public schools. Fantastic. On that aspect. So that was kind of how that one came about. Again, like some of them were like they're jokes. Like I remember a marketing meeting one day. We were in February, and they were joking and like, oh, hey, we're going month by month, kind of like some big projects we wanted to work on for marketing. And they're like, what are we going to do in April? And I joked, and I was like, hey, how about we do a 420 dinner? And they were like, cool, what do you want to do? And I was like, wait, what, you're serious? And that's how like the cannabis one came about. And I teamed up with a local cannabis shop here. So a lot of them are just joking and shooting like shit and just like off the hip, and all of a sudden it happens. So, but they all back to kind of like what I like to do, and so I can have fun at.
Where, in that point in your career, because you can't run around like a loose cannon and just shoot ideas out like that for your whole career, right? You can't make. When did you always struggle with that, where you're like in your kitchens and you're like, I have this idea but I can't execute it because I'm just a cook? And did you have a moment where it flipped for you and you were like, finally I can do my own thing, and you sought out those opportunities? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I never actually really sat back and thought about that. Yes, I will say when I was a cook, there was moments where I was like, okay, I want to try to do something, but I couldn't. But at the same time, also, because I came up in those older kitchens, that I knew my place and my role. And to be honest, I didn't think the shift in my career would happen as soon as it did. I became an executive chef at 25. I thought if I was lucky, if I got that chance when I was 30. My goal when I was like early 20s was to get to try to be one by 30 something. And that happened way earlier than I expected. So I got lucky that that shift happened earlier. But when I was younger, I think I was okay with the head down, yes chef. Like I remember in kitchens I worked in, it would be like, yes chef, no chef, 2-minute chef was all you could say. Totally. And it was silent. That was it. But I mean, they weren't fun, but at the same time, those experiences did form me into who I am now, and then also how I run the kitchens I run now, by giving that freedom to my team. It's much more of a more collaborative mindset. But I guess that, and even when I first became an executive chef, I took the mentality of it's an evolution, not a revolution. Got it. And I still had to prove myself before I could start. Like, because I mean, at that age, I was always being questioned. Like, I had to do so many tastings just to get the job. And even after I got the job, just because they weren't sure, they're like, here, we're going to hand over this, multi-million-dollar operation to a 25-year-old to run. Let's make sure we're doing this right. So it did, and it was in Chicago too. So it's like you're playing the big. Oh, sorry. You're playing in the big leagues.
Yeah.
Too. On top of that, it's like being drafted to go play for the Yankees or like
Totally.
The Cubs or somebody like that.
Yeah.
Like it's no little little mom and pop place. So
Sure.
that was. So I took some time before I started pushing the envelope. Once the accolades started coming in, some of the recognition of who I was as a chef, the lists I started getting on, that's when I was like, okay, I started to veer a little bit and started to go like, now I can push the envelope. Now I can start having a little bit of fun.
Sure.
And then that also, then everybody, myself included, started seeing how that entailed equaled more PR, more business. There was definitely a search and need to come work with me because cooks wanted to see how that was happening.
Right.
And what my mindset was, like they tried to decipher the madness that was going on in my head, so all in all, it became a win-win-win down the road, and I just never looked back.
Do you have any advice for people who, because I've certainly been there, where it's like you have all these ideas, but you're just a cook, and I love that evolution, not revolution thing, because that's the draw for a lot of people to this industry, is that creativity, like freedom to mess around and put these big ideas out on a plate. Well, where do you draw that line of like, I still have more to learn, but I still have to push it?
Well, I think someone answered that in a really roundabout, in a different kind of way.
Sure.
So first of all, like the first thing you have to take an approach to when you're looking at things like that is look at any great artists. None of them came out the gate swinging. Mm-hmm. Look at any heavy hitter in baseball, like Babe Ruth or something like that. Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Ken Griffey, like the sluggers, they go up to bat, and maybe they go up to bat 6 times out of the game. They only connect like twice.
Yep.
Not every hit was a home run.
Totally.
But when you hit it, it was out the park. But you missed quite a bit. So you got to take your time. Be more. Don't swing at everything that comes. Look at any great artists like Picasso or Van Gogh. Like they had their eras. Like you can look at their things, and they were like the blue era or whatever. Like they evolved as they were throughout their lifespan of becoming an artist, or being an artist, I should say. And if you look at them all, I say a lifespan because they're constantly evolving and changing through their lives because their inspiration changes, their surroundings changes, their environment changes. And I think if you sit back on the thing of like being quote unquote cocky or be like, I know it all, that teenage mentality of like, don't tell me what to do, I know how to do it, that we've all gone through, then you're doing yourself and your team a disservice because you're never really stop learning. I'm sorry. Like I guarantee you to this day, the David Chains, the Rene Redzepi's, the Grant Achatz, if you follow them, there's meals that they have that they post that have inspired them or re-inspired them because they're never closing their eyes to the world. They are open to the world more than anyone, and they are taking it all in as much as they can. And that's, you can't just sit back and be like, I know it all. So you definitely, but you want to do it, you want to slow the pace. Don't come out swinging. You really have to be able to take it in, to observe it, process it, because then if you just like spurt it out, like you see a trend all of a sudden, and all of a sudden you're doing it, there's no thoughtfulness in there. There's no true roots to it, and I think that's where you need to really just like there needs to be it needs to be you,
right?
And there's no truth to it then.
You've mentioned that you're very open to your staff, coming to you. Say that there is someone listening that doesn't have that chef that's kind of like really open to that. What should they be saying to that person that's maybe not as open-minded to, if they have an idea?
Yeah.
What do you like to hear from your cooks when they have this idea? Like, what sells it for you if they have this thing that they want to do?
Well, okay, so 2 parts to that. I guess there's a 2-part answer to that question. One part would be if you are working for that chef, I would hope that we're looking at the cooks that are in the kitchen who are trying to grow, and they're the ones moving from kitchen to kitchen. They'll work under a chef for a year and go on, kind of like how we did.
Right.
I would assume that person is, if that chef is being like that and you're working in that kitchen, then that chef is somebody who you're sitting in there because that person's going to still teach you something, and like it's the Daniel Boulud's. It's like some big name that's going to be on your resume that you're going to give them a year, and you're going to come out of that kitchen a bigger badass than you were when you first walked in.
Right.
So I like those kitchens, like you just, unfortunately, you're not going to change the chef's mentality. You just need to shut up, head down. That's the yes chef, no chef kind of kitchen. My approach, and now the second part to that is how I go about it is if somebody comes to me with an idea, I want to see their thought and process in it. I first let's talk it through, explain it to me. Why are you doing these things? I don't question the why because I don't think you can do it. I question a lot and I ask why a lot because I want to understand.
Right.
I seek to understand more. And if you understand the why, then there's more concrete roots to that idea. And then from there, it's like, okay, after we talk it through, and like maybe if it needs some editing or something like that, we talk it through, and then I'm like, let's put one up.
Totally.
And it's just like what any chef should do with an idea to put on their menu or run as a special is editing and process and critiquing and going through and making sure it's what it is before you put it out there. And it's just the same process on that.
Right. I just think it's so valuable to have that conversation through because you and I have both been there where we have this idea in our head and it's like, it's so good. Yeah. And the second you start to talk about it, you're like, fuck, shit. Like, that sounds so bad now that I'm actually like saying it.
Never mind, don't listen to me anymore.
It's so true. It is so true. So maybe that's a good segue into this question. What can chefs be doing better to help this next generation? So much of this show for me is about that.
That's a great question because I don't know if I know 100%. I don't know if my answer or my thought would be the right one because who knows, because it's changing so much.
Right.
And I mean, part of me wants to be like, let's get back to the point of where they need to work their asses off for a while and stage at places for free for like 3 months before you get offered a job.
I think it would be really interesting to see what an apprentice program looks like in the U.S. for chefs, like a real, not culinary school, not like you can pay to play.
Yeah.
But like, what does an actual like 2 to 5 year apprenticeship program look like?
The only one I know about is the Greenbrier that does it. Yep. That they do apprenticeship because I think that's where the Vataggio brothers
totally. But how does that look like at scale? Like it's cool. Like some of the smaller, like Thomas Keller's mentor thing.
Oh yeah.
It works, but they only take on like X number of kids per year. Like, what does it actually look like to get a full bore apprenticeship program in the U.S. going?
I think you're talking about a huge evolution there happening.
Totally.
And I think I think you're looking at some, because if you look at it the way they do in Europe, I mean, a lot of these kids, they test, they see where they're going to go. By age 15, you're in a kitchen.
Yep.
And that's where you're looking at certain, in the U.S., you got certain child labor laws in state by state. I mean, I know some states, a lot of them, you can get a waiver signed by your parents at 15 to go work.
Right.
But the limitation of the hours you can put in are very limited, which I think is fine, but I actually like that idea a lot. I think it just has to, I don't think a kid needs a test to see what school they're going into. They can go wherever they want to go. But I would appreciate that aspect a lot more if they were in a kitchen doing an apprenticeship, even if they end up going to culinary school, because so many culinary schools are if not all of them, unless you go to a program at a community college, they're all for-profit. So they sell you the dream to go in.
Exactly.
And none of them have any experience, and then they get out of school without any experience except for their internship they've had to do for however many few hours.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden they go get their first job expecting to be a sous chef making, they're told they're going to make $45,000, $50,000 a year. Totally. When I'm like, no, dude.
It's not true. It's not real. I don't know where you're getting that budget. I don't have it.
Oh, great. And I was like, so, God, how does that roll? I mean, I think it starts with, you're looking at a bigger picture with our education system and looking at allowing kids at 15 to be able to go into kitchens while they're in school. I think it would be great if, it's a budget where it doesn't, or it's an outlet in school that is like an art people want to keep adding more art to it, so it is an art, culinary arts. That if they, without adding anything to the budget of having teachers, like if there was, I would say maybe even have it as part of one of your curriculums in your school that you could sign up for, because I remember certain AP classes that we would take, you would get bused to another school to go to take like the math class or take the science class, because like you were in middle school AP, but it was a high school level.
Sure.
So maybe it's like that whole aspect of like, you take all your regular classes up to, I don't know what majority here, but like I took a lot of block scheduling when I was in like in Europe and stuff like that, where it was like I had English every other, like 3 days a week, and it was every other day, and then that was like, those were A days, and B days was like history and math, or history, art, and science, or whatever. So if you looked at a block scheduling system, you could do it where the last block of the day you left school and you went right into a kitchen and you start your apprenticeship. And by the time you're done, if you start your junior, senior year, that's 2 years there.
Sure.
You're done you have your apprenticeship degree or certificate when you're done. But the problem is then on top of that, there's so many businesses nowadays, and especially if you want to go into the hotel world, a lot of them here in the U.S. they require a degree and not a certificate. So then you go into that, which could, I guess in theory, you could go into that going towards credit, towards your culinary degree, and then you just take, so then you only really have to take 1 or 2 years of just straight book courses of like management course and like how to cost recipes and all that kind of stuff.
Whenever I have these ideas, I try to like see how far I can push it the other way. I heard something along the lines the other day of internships are going to die, and what's going to flip the other way is you're actually going to pay to go work for someone.
Oh,
how do you think that
them?
would look?
I think
so. Like someone shows up to your door, you vetted them, and they submitted an application with references or something like that.
And they pay me to come in my kitchen.
They literally pay you $20,000 a year to work at your kitchen, and they do it for 2 years. And you have it structured so that when they graduate?
I don't think it's going to catch on.
Really?
I don't think so, because you have to look at most of the things when you walk away with a certified credential, like you have a accredited school degree.
Sure.
Like I know my culinary degree, I had to make sure the school was accredited, so that degree meant something. So if they ever do want to say get out of that industry at some point, because let's be honest, especially in culinary, a lot of people get burnt out. It is a young person's world.
Right.
So I think that might be an issue, because you can't certify every restaurant as being accredited credential. I think the way our education system is and the workforce is, people look at accreditation, and I think that's going to be an issue. That was an issue. My wife's oldest brother, he went to the Art Institute before they became accredited as a graphic designer. And it kind of was like when he started working and moving up, they kind of looked at it. The company he was working with sent him to school to go get a accredited degree, because they were looking at it as like, we can't move you up any further. Great thing is they paid for it. Sad thing is he kind of like, in a way, kind of wasted 2 years of getting this certificate that didn't mean anything.
So the reason that I bring it up is because my perspective was I had the option to do my 2-year associate's degree and then stay on to do 2 more years to get my bachelor's. And I looked at what everybody was learning in those classes, and I looked at all the other chefs I looked up to, Grant, Ferran, Thomas Keller. None of them had that level of education, and to me, I looked at it and I was like, no, I don't need it.
You stopped at 2 years.
I stopped at 2 years, and it hasn't proved negative to me yet, and so I see it as like, that's my conversation, is why.
But you're unique though. You also work for yourself.
True.
Where you have to look at, like, what about the person who was raised...
wants that job.
And they were raised in a way that you have a couple of different people. You have the ones that like the corporate environment and they want to work in that direction, or that's where they really want, their dream is to be a research and development chef for McDonald's. Like, they pay, that's huge money, you know what I mean? But they're going to look at making sure that a big corporation like that is going to look at what kind of certificates and background do you have.
Got it.
And then even so, like in the hotel world, or you also have the people who are raised still with like the parents that are, they're slowly starting to die, that whole mentality starting to die out, but you went to school. You went to go get this degree before you could move on. Your dad wanted you. Like, I remember my dad was like, I don't care what you're gonna be, but you're gonna be the best damn person of that.
Totally.
Like, he's like, if you want to be a garbage man, you're gonna be the best damn garbage man. Is what I remember him vividly telling me that. So when I was trying to figure out, I was on teetering back and forth and dropping out of art school. He's the one that signed me up to go to culinary, because I was always in kitchens. He signed me up to tour the culinary school. And he was the one, because in his mind, he was like, you're really good at this. I can see the passion, even though you won't admit it at the time. I'm going to push you on this, but you're going to go do it, and you're going to get what you need so you can succeed.
Right.
So you have those kind of people too.
Yeah.
So that's my issue, is like, you're like the 1% right now. Granted, our society is changing in a way where, like, even opening restaurants, like in the past, 10 years, it was Kickstarter.
Yep.
Like people, like you have kids, really kids, having access to funding now that we never had.
Totally.
And
or
that's
my thing with it, is that I think about the people who ask me about my experience, the people who when I introduce myself and they ask me, like, oh, where did you work? Like, where did you go to school? CIA holds 8% weight. And the fact that I was at the French Laundry for a little over a year is like leaps and bounds. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, you were there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's why I bring up, like,
that's almost heavier than your degree.
Exactly. So, at what point does that flip? And if I could pay Thomas Keller $20,000 a year to go work at the French Laundry, and I think if it happens, we're gonna look back at this thing where people are lawsuiting people for staging.
Yeah.
It's like, and we're gonna laugh at it.
Well, okay. So this is my issue. Even if it's not $20,000, it's $10,000 to go stage there.
Yeah.
Do most people who don't need that degree, and they just need a little work experience because they want to open up a food truck, or they want to open up in a commercial, or not commercial, but a cafeteria, like food hall, which are becoming popular, and they have a little kiosk in there for their restaurant. Are they going to go to the French Laundry, though?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Are they going to...
I mean, it's obviously going to be very targeted.
Exactly. Right? And also, are you going to learn in that staging internship the business running aspect of things? Because, to be honest, I didn't... culinary school in college was where I learned a lot of business. And then it wasn't until I got into a certain restaurant years into my career that I really got my hands on understanding P&Ls and writing budgets and costing and controlling labor on that aspect, which you're not going to get right away. You're not even going to get in the first 2 years of working at a restaurant as a client level.
But my thing is, it would flip for everyone. Like, if one of your cooks was paying you $10,000 a year, you would prioritize teaching them those things.
But then you're becoming a culinary school.
It would become this hybrid thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's on you as a chef in this environment.
But think about how, again, just playing double.
Of course.
I automatically look at the things that can't work. Look at the issues you have with just, if you're a dinner only restaurant, like French Laundry.
Yep.
How many hours could you put into prep for that one night service? When are you going to have time to sit down and do a curriculum?
Totally. But that's my thing, is if you know that person is there for that kind of an education, why don't they work 3 days a week in the kitchen and 2 days a week as admin?
But my thing is, you have to be able to sit there, and if you're a Thomas Keller, and even his chef de cuisine, how often, the free time you do have, you're being pulled away for appearances and all that kind of stuff. And I find it's going to be difficult.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's impossible.
Totally.
And I think you're asking, let's be honest too, humans are creatures of habit, and once something's kind of set, it's really hard to make change happen.
Right.
And I think the change that you're talking about, I think is great. I think it's a great conversation. I think it's going to take a big shift in something to make that change happen in that kind of direction.
Right.
Because, I mean, again, I think it could be an option, but you're looking at a small percentage. I don't think that's going to change and get rid of culinary schools, and this is going to be the new way, because it's so targeted and so specific.
And I just think it's such an interesting.
And I would have a hard time personally, I would have a hard time coughing up $10,000, $20,000 a year, whatever it is, to pay a chef to go work in their kitchen.
Yep.
To get labor out of me.
Right.
Just for what? Because it's not the same aspect. And also, will banks give you loans, and will you be able to get student loans? Because
Totally.
look at how expensive it is. I had to get a loan for my culinary education.
Yep.
So, and that's another question. Then it's like, will banks look at that, or federal school loans look at that as an outlet that they can go? Yeah, exactly. Especially if it's not accredited.
Okay. It's just something I'm thinking about,
Yeah,
because I ask it, and there's a lot of culinary students listening.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of there's so much talk about it. I get the question all the time: is culinary school worth it? And I'm looking at other industries where it's like the videography thing. You could go work for someone and be their videographer for a couple of months.
I think. Well, okay. Let's go real quick about that thing. Is it worth it? I think it is, depending on what you put into it.
Exactly.
Just like any school, though. So my culinary school time, I thought it was really worth it, but I put a lot of my time in there. Like, I went to school. I was commuting into DC, so I would get up at like 5:30 in the morning to sit in traffic, to get to class by 7:30, to be in class all day, and then get done with class, and then go work.
Right.
Every day.
Yeah.
I worked. So I went to school full time and worked full time. And then I would do some extracurricular stuff. I'd stay after class and talk to the teachers. My mentor and really great friend, and I kind of look at it as like my second dad, was my front of the house and wine teacher in culinary school.
Yep.
But we garnered that relationship because I put so much into it that he looked at me as like, okay, you're not Norm.
Right.
Because he always joked about like he doesn't learn a student's name until after the second half of their education because
it's not worth.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
he doesn't,
not worth
because
it.
then at least he knows you're going to finish.
Yep. Segue into our next question. What about, you were talking about your dad knew that you were going to be okay in the culinary industry. For you, what attracted you to it, and what keeps you in it?
A couple of things. One would be the creative aspect that we're given. We create, even if you're in the kitchen doing another chef's menu and recipes, you're still creating something every day. I think that aspect of things, being a creative individual, being able to make something every day, is fun. Like, we get paid to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
When I was younger and when I'm on the line, the adrenaline rush, there's nothing like it.
Totally.
When service starts and that first ticket comes in, it's like, and the chef calls out the first one, it's like, and making sure your mise en place are ready, and you're like, oh shit, I'm still peeling quail eggs to poach real quick or something like that. I remember one dish I had to literally poach quail eggs, soft poach them, and then shock them, bread them, so I could fry them for the tasting menu. But they were like super soft and runny, and we all know what quail eggs, like stuff like that. Like, I had to get ready for that because we were gonna do like 150 covers that night. So that's like, out of 150 covers, we do 75 tasting menus, so it's 75 little quail eggs. So, but that adrenaline of like, oh man, like that was what kept me in it. What keeps me going now is the every day's different now with the change and shifts that are happening now. It's a lot more fun. Granted, I've kind of paid some dues to where I get to have a lot more of the fun items happening, like the events and those kind of aspects. But it's now I'm in a moment in my career where it's like, okay, how do we affect change? Like, and when I by creating the menus, doing these dinners, like, it's more of now like, okay, I'm looking at things in a different way, and to me that's exciting.
Right.
I still get the day-to-day stress of somebody calling out sick or 86ing something or running out, but that's nothing's ever perfect. So like, the grass isn't always green on the other side. So now I honestly don't see myself being in any other industry. I don't know if I will be in the facet of the industry that I am in currently forever, but I don't see, if I ever was to move on from what I'm doing now, it's still somehow, some way would be connected to this industry.
Right. Because you couldn't go and be a rapper and still incorporate food into that. It's easier to just stay where you're at and incorporate the other things that you enjoy.
Yeah,
so
well,
you can scratch those itches with
that
where you're
definitely. But I also don't know. Like, I could go and like I've done stuff when I was in high school where I was kind of like I did small little graphic design stuff for people, and I just couldn't see myself being in like a corporate kind of job in that way, where I'm in my cubicle 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and be on project. Like, I get to be that corporate person and the project manager in a much different mindset.
Sure.
Without having to have the constraints of what some of these other businesses and industries would have.
Sure.
But on that whole mindset, like, you know, I don't want to say everything's for certain. Like, who knows 5-10 years from now where I'll be, but right now, if I was to choose, it would still be in some facet somehow connected to food and beverage.
So build that perfect day for me. What does that ideal perfect day at the office look like for you? If you had to like set up, like, you're looking at a blank calendar, and where do those hours break down?
That's interesting. I get different like adrenaline rushes, or get that different like that high differently sometimes. Like, I know it sounds super nerdy, but there's sometimes I walk when I have like a kick-ass month, or even a really shitty month financially, but I'm able to explain and really dig down into it. Like ownership meetings, like there's sometimes I've walked into an ownership meeting and talked through the P&L, the financial statements from the month before, and when they're blown away, like I get a high from that. Like,
interesting.
Like it's like showing up like that in a way that they wouldn't expect, and especially when you walk in like looking like people judge a book by its cover. So let's be real. When I walk in that way, they expect me just to be a chef, to sit down in the corner, and when I'm able to talk circles around them in numbers, that to me is like exciting. But then the other perfect day would be like the 3 days leading up to a dinner, like the Eat with Your Eyes dinner we did, or like Cochon coming up on this weekend. Like those 3 days leading up to it, like where it's like I clear my calendar, I come in, and I get to be a cook again and and like actually be in the kitchen, get my cutting board out, have my knives ready, get my little bane of my spoons and all, and I just start ticking off the list. That to me is like when you first put that prep list up on the fridge. Like we have our stainless steel fridge. I use in my communication fridge, and it has the menu, and it has each item itemized out with like all the ingredients that need to be prepped out underneath each of them. And as you start seeing like it check off, like tell it the day of, and it's all checked off, and you're grabbing everything. Like that to me is like a good day.
So it has to be a mix right now for you.
It can't be one thing all the time, because then I become complacent. I get bored. Like I think the back and forth of doing a little bit of everything keeps things interesting for me.
Do you find that you enjoy that? On the last interview that I posted, it was a big emphasis on repetition, and it's kind of like when you get there, it's never the thing. Do you know what I mean? Like being the executive chef, and you can kind of just like oversee everything, and you're finally off the line. You can't chase that, because once you get there, you have to find the joy in the repetition of like you love putting that prep list up every day, and you love that. Like
it was funny. It's funny you say that. A general manager that I worked for, his name was Avi. When I first became this exec chef at the age I did, he said, before I took the job, he goes, "Are you sure this is what you want?" And I looked at him, I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't I? And he goes, because where are you gonna go next? Because you've hit the ceiling. It's very few places to go after that, and you can never step back and go back once you cross over. And I was like, in my head, I was like, whoa, I didn't even think about it that way. But then I also have been the one growing up that don't tell me I can't do anything. And don't tell me that this is the ceiling, this is it. And that's what I've been doing now, is looking, and like with the new role I'm in now as a regional support, is like kind of like creating these new roles. Just because they're not there doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It may not have been the right person to get that job before, or create it, or have the drive, or whatever, or the right time, opportunity, place, and whatever. So it's funny you said that.
I'm gonna rapidly change gears here. What's the best meal you've had in recent memory?
Oh, easy. It's funny. That one's easy. I was just in Italy with my wife in end of June, beginning of July, and we were in this little area, southern part of the stiletto part of the heel of the stiletto, called Lecce was where we stayed at, Lecca, and we went to towns like Otranto, Santa Maria, like the most southern part of that part. Like we were looking at Greece from the coast. Anyways, we were on a boat out there in Otranto. We met a couple from Milan, and like where we were like the only Americans there. This is where Europeans go to visit, and they were like, I mean, people would tell us like not to talk about this place because they didn't want Americans showing up.
Yep.
But we were talking to them, and they found out I was a chef, and it was like he was connected to the food world. His sister-in-law or sister imports Prosecco to Australia, and his mom's uncle imports Prosecco to the U.S., so they're kind of connected. But anyways, his mom told them about a restaurant that they go to now every year down there that they told us about, and we went there, and like we went, the place we were staying, we asked them to help us make reservations, so we didn't speak Italian. Where we were at, not a lot of people spoke English, so we had them help, and the guy was like, oh yeah, the place is really good, so I started getting excited.
Yep.
We drive into this place, this town, and it literally, I mean, population had to be 500 people.
Really?
It was so small, and we parked, and we walked past the restaurant like 3 times before we realized like, oh, this is
That's
it.
the place.
And we walked in, and we're like, you know, the outside of it, we're like, are we serious? Like, how can it be that good? We walked in, and the person checks us in, and we go, they take us through the hallway, and all of a sudden we go into the backyard, and it was this courtyard that was just unreal, like gorgeous, like just beautiful, surrounded courtyard on the outside. Kind of looked like almost like 70s like Art Deco in a way, the way with like art on the wall and like the covering of the courtyard. But again, nobody there spoke English. Luckily, the couple, without even knowing that was on that boat, they showed up because it was their last night there, and that's when they were having their meal. So they helped us. They sat next to us, and they translated. But it was 22 euros. And it was 11-course tasting menu.
No way.
And yeah, dude, it's so unreal. And it wasn't like what you think of like tasting menu of like 11 courses. What it was is the owner works the floor when you do this, and he brings a cart up, and it has the fish, it has the shrimp and the langoustines and all that he literally got from the water. Like he goes to the boats before they go to the market and buys from them like 2 hours before he opens. And what he does is he pulls up next to it, opens it up, and he starts taking like live shrimp that he just peels the shell off, puts a certain olive oil and certain salt on it, and that's a course. And it was so mind-blowing because like we were having like langoustine that was literally live, that here you normally, like langoustine needs to be either cooked or to eat it raw, you have to have it within a few hours because it starts producing ammonia and and it starts decaying quickly. So that's where we had an issue. Like that to me was mind-blowing. Like here he has like live, like fresh, like hour ago, and he's feeding it to us like sashimi style. And that was the whole course. Like it was that with like some fresh raw fish and like almost like omakase kind of style dinner, sushi place, but in Italy, in a small little town, hidden in a courtyard that you would never even know for 22 euros. To me was, I mean, I could charge like easily $300 here for that, and that to me was just mind blowing.
Was there like pasta or pizza or bread or?
There's an option for that. But in the tasting menu, it wasn't that.
Cool.
There was a couple warm dishes that was like seafood, like focus at the beginning, which I thought was interesting. It started with hot dishes and then went to the raw cold.
Interesting.
But the pasta was something you ordered afterwards if you wanted it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. It was definitely to this day one of those meals that just sticks out in my mind of just where was I? How did that happen?
Have you been to Echevarri in Spain?
No, I've never been to Spain.
Very similar.
I've never been to Spain.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's on my list. Yeah, I know.
But that's very, like the way that you're describing it, very, very similar meal.
Yeah.
For me.
Oh, really?
It's just like, I mean, he serves his like the gambas that are just like, he puts them in a tammy and just shakes them over the fire.
Oh, wow.
And like they just slowly, like, it's crazy. Very similar.
But it's so simple.
Yep, the way that you're describing is exactly the same.
So simple. And that to me is like, that's so amazing because we look at so much about technique and all this other stuff to manipulate things,
Yep.
be it a rub or compressing it in something or whatever. And here it was that there was no hiding. It was literally like this raw shrimp or prawn or whatever with a certain type of olive oil and salt. That was literally it.
Totally.
Or maybe you'd put like an herb on it, like fresh ripped leaves. And it was, to me, there was like, it was mind blowing.
Yeah. Where do you feel like that gets lost on some people? Like, we can have this such sincere appreciation for it because we've seen the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Where it's like so manipulated and so over garnished, you know? So it's like,
I think
because I wonder to myself why places like that can't exist in certain places.
Well, I think certain places it can't because you just don't have the product there.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the fact that this guy literally went like a half a mile down the road to get the product right out of the net, like that, like you just have to. That's location. Is first part. I think it does get lost to people because if you've never worked in that world, like that you were talking about, where it is manipulating or garnishing and all you've done was simple, straightforward food, I think to those people, you like, okay,
it's just a shrimp.
It's the day-to-day again. Where to us, I think we appreciate it because we were in that grind for so much that we're like, it's a breath of fresh air of like, oh, I can just sit here and it is what it is. I don't have to try to figure it out.
Right,
like, you know what I mean?
Right. It's so interesting. I'm gonna rapid fire question you now. It's did you do breakfast this morning?
Have I? No, I didn't.
No?
Coffee.
Okay. So it is your first day off after a work week.
Yeah.
You're standing in front of your kitchen. How do you make your eggs?
Mine, sunny side up.
And what would it change if you made for your wife?
Either scrambled or like a bake.
Is that just how she likes it, or that's how you like? Okay.
Yeah, that's how she likes it.
Interesting.
I like mine like runny and like slutty and sloppy,
Yep.
and she likes hers definitely cooked all the way through.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Name an ingredient that you're obsessed with right now.
Ooh, charcoal. Charcoal.
As far as like activated charcoal
And
as
all
an
type, like
ingredient?
making like either activated charcoal or making your own charcoal or ash.
Yep.
Burning, like it's something that we look at as just utilizing it as like a heating element, and it's like literally decay of something that has been so overcooked, but yet and now all of a sudden we're utilizing it in a different way.
Takes on a new.
Yeah, to me it's just fascinating. Like there is a flavor there. Like I make charcoal ash and all out of lemons and limes that the bar uses or whatever, and it brings on like a smoky, bitter, like citrus flavor onto things when I use it, or like coconut charcoal or anything like that, like to marbleize like terrines or something like that.
Yep.
So there's so many different approaches to it that I just like, to me it's just fascinating that people look at it when you say it, they get like, oh my god, you're using that, but like, or just cooking right on charcoal, right on it too, and not having a barrier, like just not even just like as an ingredient, but as like just in general, charcoal to me is fascinating.
Do you guys have a bean show time?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cookbook that you've gifted most or are most likely to recommend to people?
Culinary Artistry and Flavor Bible.
Got it. What's their new one? They just came out with a new one.
Yeah.
Have you picked it up?
No, I haven't. No.
I want to because it looks really good. What is it called?
It's art. It's like something around plating, like the whole plating aspect. Yeah, I forget what it's called too, but I know.
They just came out.
Yeah.
Man, those books are so good. Technique that you're still intimidated by in the kitchen.
I would probably say like, and it's more of like a dish than anything, sushi.
Interesting.
Like cutting the fish right, making the rice. Like, it's one of those things I don't even touch. I let the masters be the masters, and I go enjoy it that way. I just don't even want to like approach it. Like, yeah, we'll do a sashimi or a crudo, but that's not sushi to me. That's taking an element of that and then garnishing it full of stuff. But when it comes to actual sushi, I won't even touch it, man.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll just go eat it.
You somehow get a call right after this interview, and you just won an all expenses paid trip to eat at your dream restaurant. and when you get there, there's someone you've always wanted to talk to, waiting to have dinner with you. What restaurant is it, and who is that person?
Oh man, I've eaten at a lot of places. So the one place I never got to eat that I wanted to eat, and I never could get in, would be El Bulli.
Yep.
Right back in the heyday though, like early 2000s.
Got it.
Right when like spherification, when they first invented the spherification aspect and stuff
Okay.
like that. Like that year of El Bulli, was that like 2005, 2006?
2004,
Yeah. So that year of El Bulli, eat there, and who would I be sitting next to have a conversation with?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, you're playing with
Questlove.
Okay, I was good.
Questlove.
Smart. Have you cooked for him before?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But that's who I would. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like he would really get down at one of your dinners where you do like a collaboration.
Yeah, and that's why I think it would be great because you could talk food with him, but then
Yep.
you could talk. I would be intimidated to talk music with that guy because his music knowledge, if you even just watch him on like the Jimmy Fallon show,
Totally.
it's unreal. Like that guy's like a music encyclopedia.
Yep.
It's unreal.
Yep.
So yeah.
Do you feel like it gets screwed up when you get to that level where it's like you can't enjoy music anymore? I think about that with food sometimes, where it's like you get so educated and so well eaten.
No, I think it's opposite.
Okay.
I think you appreciate the good music, and you can
Yeah.
appreciate you can actually have a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of the musician that you're listening to
Right.
because you know what has influenced them because
Sure.
you know those sounds.
Yeah.
Just like you can look at a chef's dish and you can see what kitchens he's come from or gone through or who inspires
Yep.
him or her
Yep.
because that chef is then put what they've known on that plate.
It's something that I wanted to circle back to when you were talking about when you'll get these light bulb moments, and they like to you it just seems like, oh yeah, I just came up with this 30 minutes ago, because that's what you have to say. Because it's true,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's really been 15 years in the making. That idea has
True.
been 15 years in the making, and I don't want to skew it for those for cooks listening that are like, yeah, I can just have this idea and it'll be cool.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about like your cooks coming to you with an idea, it's the reason you talk it through.
Yeah.
Because you have all of this prior knowledge to kind of like ask those questions.
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
You're right. I guess the idea of those dinners in the moment
Yep.
is like 30 seconds.
Yep.
But to be honest, I'm 34 right now, so a lot of it is 34 years in the making.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. Did you have a lot of sushi in Japan? Back to your sushi
Oh God,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
I ate like it was unreal when I ate out there. Yeah.
Totally. Where can people find you online and get in touch and ask you questions? Because I feel like we covered a lot of really interesting topics. And people are gonna-
Social media.
Yeah.
Easiest. I mean, even Manny.
Yeah. Yep.
He actually reached out to me years ago on Facebook
Interesting.
and I used to give him advice via like Facebook on he would ask questions. So I would say Facebook or Instagram.
Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram. I probably because it's connected to all of them. It would be easier.
Yep.
But I'm pretty active and respond in a timely manner.
Okay, cool. One person asked a question online for you to define Pacific Northwest cuisine.
Interesting. Pacific Northwest cuisine to me, and I'm gonna probably make it more of like Seattle cuisine is what I'm looking at. Is it's such an international hub, even prior to like say where it's at right now with Amazon bringing people in and Delta's now international headquarters being here. I mean, you got to look at what's here. Like you have the it's not even Chinatown, it's international district.
Right.
You have influences from Vietnam, Thai, China, Japan, but then you also have like the Nordic inspiration and Swedish and that whole realm of European influence.
Totally.
Not as heavy as you would find, like say French, which I think is interesting. But everybody uses I would say it's very much localized on what the ingredients are. People are very, and which is great because they're very proud of what they get here. Be the wine, be whatever beer, or distilled spirit, to the mushrooms, to the seafood, the shellfish. Which I mean, I would be proud too when it's in season because the stuff I would source in Chicago came from over here for certain aspects. So it's very prideful, very local centric, but you have to take a look and see how the international community here has really influenced the direction of where people are going with it too.
Right. Do you are you familiar with the difference between a melting pot and a salad? Have you heard that expression before?
No.
Someone brought this up the other day, and it's kind of like stuck in my mind. They said Seattle's not a melting pot. Seattle's a salad, where it's like there's different elements, and they're kind of like touching each other, so the flavors sometimes mix, but you can pick them out individually if you want, and you can see them. It's not a melt because it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't fuse together.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
yeah, no, that makes complete sense, and I would agree with that 100%.
Got it.
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah.
It's a salad, not a melting pot.
I may have to steal that one.
It's stuck in my brain, and I was like, whoa, that is really good.
I'm definitely stealing that.
Thanks for listening to the Emulsion podcast. I appreciate your ears more than you know. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help sponsor the show, head on over to patreon.com/Justin Khanna. Other ways you can help out right now include giving this show a review on iTunes so more people can find it. I also love seeing you folks liking and commenting on the video if you listen that way, or even just share this episode with a friend. Now's normally where I would tell you that my name is Justin Khanna, and I hope you have a good one, but you've probably got another podcast episode to listen to, so I'm just gonna get out of the way here. Excuse me.